How's it, folks? The massive 1.1 patch for Tainted Grail, the Fall of Avalon, has just dropped. It took me a bit longer than expected to get this video out, as I wanted to do some testing under a New Game Plus save and share some of my experience with that. Before that, let me just go through an overview of the major additions for this patch. Starting off with, you now being able to play in New Game Plus mode once you complete the main story. I'm not sure if there's a cap on how many New Game Plus modes you can go through in a save, but I don't think there is a cap, just like there isn't a cap with your actual level. They've added in a new Transmog system. I'll go into a bit more detail about that later. There's been various Forlorn Swords fixes and content additions, so that's Act 3 zone, including much more loot to find everywhere, as well as 3 new caves. There have been a couple of third-person perspective camera improvements, such as the player no longer hunching over so much when running around. There's some late-game console stability improvements. I do not own a console, so unfortunately I can't test this out, so I'm not sure if it's still crashing or if it's fixed. There's kind of a mixed bag reception about that over in Discord, where some people are saying still crashing frequently and others are saying they're able to play for hours without any issues. So give it a try. They've also changed the pet by adding a couple of new forms, including a mount and a summon. They've added the origin potion crafting recipe, so now you'll be able to respec as often as you like, as long as you have the resources to craft the potion. They've added new weapons and armor sets. They've added 3 new dungeons, as well as 6 new quests, as well as a lot of other quest fixes, new rewards, dungeon redesign. And those new quests and dungeons, they basically all in Act 3 zone to make it more similar to Act 1 and Act 2, so it's not so heavily weighted. They've also done a bunch of visual and audio updates all around the game, including the UI. There's new enemy sound effects and a few extra tracks. There's quite a lot of bug fixes and rebalancing all over the place. I am not going to go through that. Instead, I'll just paste the patch notes either in the comments or in the description, and then you can just do Control F to look for specific bug fix. Let me start off with going into more detail about the New Game Plus mode. Once you've completed the final main story quest, where you're given an option to either continue in the world or to move on to New Game Plus. If you choose to move on to New Game Plus, you'll go all the way back to the starting prison zone, Island Asylum, starting in your cell, and you're going to have to go through those dialogue choices to pick your character stats. But this is quite useful because if you didn't use something like cooking or archery or whatnot, picking those stat increases, it does actually bump up your proficiency with that stat. So if you go with a hunter option and you hadn't maxed out your archery, you'll gain a couple of levels in archery, which is quite useful if you want to change up your playstyle for the New Game Plus, which is something I would recommend. They've also debuffed your armor for each New Game Plus level you go through, so you'll lose 50 armor for every New Game Plus level, make you a bit more squishy. Enemies are generally stronger and have higher status resistances, so they will take more hits to take down, and it will take longer for you to build up, say, the frost or the freeze or the poison or the fire or whatever. You will also lose your kin's power, so your kin Arthur slowdown power thing, and the different upgrades you'd put into it with the kin soul. All of your recipes that you'd learned previously, you're going to have to relearn all of them, either through quests, buying the books, or finding them or whatnot. All the quests, keys, and readable items will also be removed from your inventory. Everything else you keep. Keep your money, keep your weapons, keep your armor, you keep all your crafting resources, everything stored in your stash remains there. All of that you keep. And then every new item and crafted item in the New Game Plus mode will have better stats compared to the base game mode. You'll become more squishier, depending on the previous game mode's armor, but you'll find better armor with each New Game Plus mode, and you can craft better versions of that armor as well. And on top of that, a couple of enemies will also drop more loot. In my first playthrough, I basically ran around as a mix between a two-hander and a mage. Still very easy to kill enemies, but it does take a couple of extra hits, whereas before I was easily one-shotting enemies in the end game. Now you have to take a couple of hits to do similar amount of damage, and this is using the previous versions of the spells and weapons I got, and not the new stuff I picked up in New Game Plus. And on top of that, if you had missed out on the double identity and the no change, no destiny achievements revolving Caradoc in the Island Asylum, starting New Game Plus will be a perfect opportunity for you to pick up those achievements, as you do start off in the cell with all of your weapons and armor and spells and whatnot that you had unlocked. So it's much easier to do those specific achievements. And then moving on to the Transmog system, it's now possible for you to change the looks of your weapons and your armor. To do this, you'll need to be able to do some handcrafting, so generally go to a crafter's bench. However, if you ever choose to do this frequently, I would recommend buying one of the player homes, either the little hut down by the beach in the Act 1 zone or the house in the town in Kurnacht, as if you choose to try and use the Transmog system at any other crafting bench, it will cost you thousands of gold pieces. Whereas if you do it in a crafting bench in a home that you own, then it's free. You don't have to pay any cost to do the Transmog system. So if you want to mess around with the Transmog system, highly recommend doing it in your own home. And as long as you have picked up an item, it will be added to the library for you to be able to transmog your various weapons or armor into that, including your cape. So it's every weapon has to correspond with its associated weapons. You can't make a one-hand sword into a two-handed hammer, but you can change it into different one-handed swords. And every, for instance, helmet can be changed to every other helmet version that you have collected. All in all, nice to see those getting added into the game. And then moving on to the little pet, there's a couple of extra features added to it after it's hatched, basically depending on what you feed it. So there's a couple of different options. Depending on what you feed it will change its behavior or give it different gameplay effects, like turning it into a mount. And for those of you who ended up losing your hand, if you speak to QoL and Black Canis, you'll now have the chance to, let's just say, play the game how it was intended. There's also a couple of minor fixes that are nice to see. So if you go into your stash, there's a keybound option to immediately add all your crafting resources into your stash, so you don't have to click on them individually to move them across, which is quite nice. And if you're under any other subheading, you can also choose to move everything out of that subheading into your stash. So if you're not planning to use any alchemy or whatnot, you can just move all your potions that you pick up into your stash with one button press, which saves up your inventory weight and makes it more convenient. So it's quite nice to see a little quality of life improvement there. And then there's a whole bunch of new items that have been added into the game. If you're interested in them, go check out the patch notes, because I don't want to spoil any of that stuff. And then moving on to the major gameplay changes. So I already mentioned that you're going to be losing 50 armor every time you go through New Game Plus, but on top of that, your armor will be hard capped at 95%, so you can't go above that anymore. And then on top of that, they've also removed you being able to gain crit chance of upgrading items in the game. That doesn't mean there's no longer items with crit chance attached to them. It just means when you upgrade in that item, it won't upgrade the crit chance. So you can't max out your crit chance by just having one cape equipped, for example. And for those of you who did upgrade those items just to get the crit chance available, all those items have been brought back to their default state and the resources will be returned to you. Otherwise, there's like a lot of different changes to the gameplay, quests, the world, environment, technical changes, audio changes, graphical changes, UI changes, big changes in this patch. It's a massive one. I am not going to go through it all because it's going to take forever and there's a lot of spoilers involved in those patch changes. Otherwise, I hope you all have a fantastic day. Take care and cheers for now.